Sports Video Group is in New York City at the Microsoft Tech Center for the SVG Sports Graphics Forum. Brandon Costa reporting for Sports Video Group. I have the pleasure now to be joined by Maria Rapetskaya. She's the founder and creative director from Undefined Creative. Maria, thanks so much for being here today. Great to see you.
Thank you so much.
So we were on a session today talking about specifically designing graphics for digital devices, social media platforms, smaller phones, streaming devices. For those out there who have spent most of their career building graphics for big screens, be them television sets, movie screens, what are some of the obvious key differences when designing graphics for these very trendy now smaller devices?
Right. Well, I think the interesting thing about broadcast is for a while there's been this aesthetic that's moved closer to almost film, with very small type, fine details, really refined work. And there are people who've really honed themselves on working within that aesthetic, and they have to throw it away when they move over to working for mobile. A lot of times I find that amazing designers who are so great at broadcast come over and they'll give me their layouts for social or really any sort of digital look, and my first thought is make it bigger, and then they come back and I say no, make it bigger. And round three is no, guys, I really mean that. And I've actually had to tell our lead designer once or twice to go look at it on your phone. Really, just forget that you may be watching this on a 70-inch TV. This is your phone, and if you're talking about one of the older, like an iPhone 5, that screen is about 3 inches across. Right. And if you don't turn it, that's really all you have to work with. And I think it's difficult for us because we spend so much time developing an aesthetic. And it's an aesthetic we're proud of, and we're known for as designers. And to really just scrap it and effectively start from scratch is difficult.
Yeah. So bigger, simpler, easier to see on a smaller device.
Small detail, forget it, because a lot of times we're faced with compress that down to 10 megs.
Right. Sure.
Your fine lines are not going to look refined.
Right. So you shared a really good case study example with some of the work that you did with a great organization, Hockey Fights Cancer. Talk a little bit about how that process worked. A lot of different buckets, a lot of different designs, different shapes, different everything. How did that kind of come together?
Well, I think that's interesting because usually you start out working with a job in one of two ways. You're either creating a lot of original assets or you're being thrown whatever exists. And Hockey Fights Cancer, because of the nature of the project, we got thrown whatever was already there. Obviously, with a project like that, there are always going to be rights issues for what footage can be used. But then having to do a TV spot and then a bunch of digital banners opens up a whole new list of problems. I think, we were laughing about it. I said, no photographer out there goes out and says, I'm going to capture a beautiful moment between a player and a child, and I'm going to make it look great in 16:9, 4:3, and then this really weird horizontal dimension and a really fine vertical. So you get these, you get attached to stills. You get attached to beautiful photos, and you throw them into like a 350 by 200, and you're like, okay, this is great. And then you try that in the 728 by 90. Good luck with that. And so one of the biggest challenges was, how do we work with photography that exists? No one's running out and shooting anything special for this. And how do we find similar shots to work for different dimensions that still carry a message across? And there's always a question of kind of how much retouching is really retouching when you're working with compositional problems. It's not a question of, take this person out or make this a different scene. It's a question of, you've got 4 people standing in line. They're all different heights. Usually it's not a problem. But when you're working with 90 pixels in height, it is, right? So, and these are things that really never come up when you're working on broadcast, or rarely. I mean, you have to be really limited by your design for this to become a problem. But this was a real challenge because I think it was the first time that we had to work with an extensive package that was so limited in assets. So I think that's kind of the key takeaway is don't get too attached to the photos and assets you want to use.
All right, well, it's Undefined Creative. They're doing fantastic work over there. Maria Rapetskaya. Maria, thanks so much again for the expertise. Really appreciate it. For more from SVG's Sports Graphics Forum, you can visit us online at sportsvideo.org.